Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Two Guys and a Bible right here on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. I am William Bell, co-host with Dr. Don K. Preston. And we're looking forward to a great study today. I see that Don Preston has finally sneaked into the studio. And but we're glad to have him at any time he arrives. At any rate, how are you doing, Don? What's going on out in Ardmore, Oklahoma, and around the world?
Well, yeah, it's great to be here. My computer decided it wanted to do something really weird and strange. It demanded that I completely re-enter my passcode before I could log in. I had changed it and forgotten what I had changed it to. So I had to go through all of that mess of rediscovering and resetting my password. And, you know, it just did it kind of arbitrarily as far as I was concerned. But anyway, here I am. Very, very glad to be here. I don't know why our computers do some of these things like they do. Just the other day, my main office computer, I was converting a document file for a book, my brand new book entitled "Looking for the Parousia, Were Jesus' Apostles Confused?" And Kindle has this conversion program. And, you know, they say, well, this makes it very, very easy. It makes it very, very simple for you. And I had used it with success before. It was very simple. I used it. I converted the program to Kindle. It said the conversion is successful. And then it brought up another dialog box. It says, do you want to make this an easy access file? And I hit yes. And it locked my computer completely up. My screen went black. And I've never been able to get it back. In fact, I had to take my computer to the computer store this morning. The technician there, a super, super sharp guy, he told me, he said, I've never, ever heard of anything like this. He said, this is a brand new one on me. And so I'm going, oh, wonderful. Leave it to Preston to have something wrong with a computer that nobody's ever heard of before. And so I don't know what's wrong with it. Thankfully, I have another computer in the front office of my office space. And so I've been using that. And I have to tell you, it's been a very exciting week. I had some folks from Germany that I really did not know, to be honest about it. They sent me a file in which they had translated my book, The Last Days Identified, into German. And they said, this is for you to put on Kindle. It's for you to do whatever you want to do with. We just felt such a sense of gratitude for your work, for your ministry. We watch your YouTubes, etc. And we just felt like this is something that needed to be done. There are no preterist books in German, and so we wanted to give this to you in the hopes of perhaps that you could publish it. And so that was just, I mean, that came out of the clear blue. I got contacted today by another individual from Norway who informed me that there's some really, really exciting things happening in Norway, that doors are opening, and said, well, we need books in Norwegian. And I said, well, unfortunately, I do not know any Norwegian, but I'm hopeful that somebody, I didn't type this out, but I should have said, hint, 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 that somebody will step forward and, pardon me, and decide to translate my books into Norwegian as a labor of love. And he wrote back and gave me the thumbs up sign. So who knows? Who knows what that will lead to? But very exciting in my correspondence with him. He was aware of your ministry, and you've been very, very helpful to him in his understanding of covenant eschatology. And so here's someone. Now, I've got several contacts from Norway, to be honest about it. I've got one individual who watches the YouTube videos very, very faithfully. I think the man has bought every book that I have written. He very often contacts me and says, "What's next? What's the next book?" And so it's surprising the number of people that I've heard from Norway. And by the way, this one individual that I just mentioned, he said that he very regularly preaches in a circuit of churches. One of the churches is a congregation of over 2,500 people. And so he said that he's trying to introduce covenant eschatology into all of the churches that he preaches to. So some really, really exciting things happening so far this week, William.
Well, that sounds great. It's very good. We continue to hear from people as well, and I think, and this is probably someone that you know, but got some contacts from Australia, I think, this week, and there have been some others. So the response is good. The radio broadcast is still getting some good responses as well, and seems to be expanding in terms of the audience. So I'm excited about that. Nothing that I've heard of about book translation, but nevertheless, it's good to know that that's out there and that people are really putting this information out. I mean, I can see that it's continuing to grow, and just really, really exciting to hear about it. And I think, the foundation has been well laid so that, even, after we're long gone, eschatology will thrive. The view will continue to grow. It will continue to thrive. And, we're trying to get your books out as far and wide as we possibly can so that, people will have, the information that they need. And, of course, there's all the other resources that are out there that hopefully they'll take advantage of. They can copy everything that I have that they want. In terms of, what's on the website, et cetera. So, hey, there it is, and just let people take it and use it and keep pushing forward.
Amen to that. I mean, you touched on a point there that is so extremely, extremely valid and true. And there is such a wealth of information that is available for people to do their research now. You and I both know that there are some men out there who are doing some really, really excellent writing. Terry Cropper is a guy. I know you've read some of his material. Terry Cropper does some really, really excellent research. I know that he works in conjunction with Joe Daniels from time to time. Joe Daniels does some really good things very,
yes,
very often. And so, I mean, you sit and you think about these different individuals that I'll tell you this, 6 months ago, I'd never heard of them. And all of a sudden they start popping up. There's a guy that has appeared on that anti-preterist Facebook page. His name is Bill. I mean, this guy's sharp. And there are others exactly like him. I have to tell you, I have a nephew that had all but lost his faith in the Lord. He was completely and totally disillusioned with church and, politics. and what have you. And he started studying my books. He contacted me and asked me what I was, what all the deal was with what I was doing. And so I sent him some books, and I want to tell you, this guy's life has completely, totally turned around. And I started to call him a young man. In fact, when I talked to him personally, that's what I call him. I say, "Hey, young man, what's going on?" He said, "You seem to forget that I'm 50 years old now." I said, "Well, look, young man, 50 is young in my books these days."
That's right.
But nonetheless, I mean, I am just so deeply impressed and so pleased and so proud of where he is at in his spiritual life these days. And I mean, he gets on these anti-preterist Facebook pages, and he doesn't back down from anybody. And I may not agree with every single minor point that he makes, but that's not the point. I mean, he's got a rock-solid foundation, and like I said, he's not afraid to engage them. He's been laying it on Sam Frost lately, and I'm talking taking him to the woodshed. And, of course, all Sam Frost can do is just ridicule him and scoff at him because he's not a, quote, scholar, unquote. And I can tell you this, my nephew may not be able to quote N.T. Wright or R.T. France or any of those men like that. But I want to tell you, the young man studies the Bible, and he studies it hard, and he studies it in depth. And I know you've read some of his comments on Facebook. And, I mean, this guy does a really, really good job. And, in all candor, I've contacted him privately a couple of different times, and I said, "Hey, maybe you ought to lower the rhetoric a little bit, lower the heat just a tad." And, he said, "Well, I know, but I just can't," he said, "I just cannot abide the willful ignorance and the unchristian, the ungodly attitudes and language that these people use, and so I have to fire back at them just a little bit." And he does. So, like I said, boy, he doesn't back off from anybody. And it's so incredible to see him from a young man, truly a young man, that you could literally see losing his faith, going through a period of time in which he had no interest in the Lord, interest in church. He had no interest in the Bible or studying the Bible. And you just knew this was a self-destructive path. And not a super well-educated guy, except he has dedicated himself to knowing the Scriptures. And that is just, I have to tell you, it's a source of tremendous pride to me in my nephew, to see where he was and to see where he is now. And it's just a prime example of how our opponents like to say, well, full preterism leads to atheism, full preterism leads to Israel only, full preterism causes people to lose their faith. And all I've got to do is point to my nephew and say, you guys don't have a single clue in the world about what you're talking about. And here is just one example of literally hundreds that I could give of peoples whose faith has been restored as a result of covenant eschatology. And so, anyway, that's a little bit of a sidetrack, but it's nonetheless so exciting to see people like that. It's exciting to hear from continuing numbers of people from around the world who are building on their faith, who are doing their best to share the word. This one individual from Norway told me today, he said, we continue to preach, we continue to teach, and we continue to share. Said a lot of our friends have started calling us unchristian names and telling us we're not even Christian, even Christians, but we will continue. I didn't write back and say, well, that's just part of being a preterist. You got to get used to being called all sorts of names if you're going to be a preterist. So like I said,
anything.
it's exciting.
Yeah, they'll call you anything but a believer,
Exactly. I had one person, in fact, it was Sam Frost, over the weekend said, and I want our listeners to catch what Sam Frost has said. Sam Frost says, I have more in common with an Orthodox Jew than I do with a full preterist. Now, I want you to think about that, folks. Full preterists believe in God the Father. We believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. We believe the New Testament is God's final revelation of God to man. The Orthodox Jew hates the very name of Jesus. He calls the New Testament a bunch of spurious lies. And yet, even though the full preterist believes that God and Christ, the Father and Christ, kept their word, even though the Orthodox Jews say Jesus lied, Jesus was a failed prophet, and therefore worthy of condemnation, worthy of crucifixion. While the preterist says he is the Son of God, his word did not fail, he kept his word. Sam Frost, who, by the way, I'll be having a 2-day formal radio debate the last week of May, Sam Frost says he has more in common with an Orthodox Jew who hates the name of Jesus, says the New Testament is a bunch of lies, and that Jesus lied and failed. He's got more in common with the Orthodox Jew than he does a Christian. Now, folks, if that's not sad, I don't know what is. And if that's not convoluted, I don't know what is. If that doesn't show how far Sam Frost has devolved and sunken in his theological journey, I don't know what else it would take to demonstrate to anyone how far he has sunk. The very idea to say that you have more in common with Orthodox Jews who hate Jesus, hate the New Testament, who believe Jesus was a false prophet worthy of death, you got more in common with them than you do preterists who affirm the deity of Jesus, inspiration of the New Testament, and the faithfulness of Christ in keeping his word. I mean, I was literally, there's not a lot that Sam has said over the last many months that has truly shocked me. I've been surprised at some of it to see how far out it has been, how illogical, how unscriptural, how unhistorical. But this truly, genuinely shocked me, as nothing else he has said has shocked me. And I mean, he's called us as full preterists. He has called us stupid, ridiculous, loons, ignorant, fools, and I could keep on going of all of the adjectives that Sam Frost has used to and called full preterists. Okay, heat of the moment maybe, but he's got more in common with an Orthodox Jew than he does full preterists who love the Lord. Absolutely mind-blowing. So it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Well, that certainly is. That's a shocker. Just hard to believe that someone would take such a position in terms of comparing themselves with those who would reject Jesus Christ altogether as the Messiah. Not only reject him, but say extremely derogatory things about him. That says a lot. That speaks volumes.
It really does. It really does. Okay. Well, I tell you what, let's get back into our text this evening. As we closed out last week, I had shared with you Jeremiah chapter 3, 15 and following. And you can start back at 14, but anyway, I shared with everyone how, as I was preparing for my very first formal public debate, I went and I spoke with a very renowned Bible scholar. As I shared with you last week, this man could read the Hebrew, he could read the Greek, just a tremendous intellect. And I shared with him Jeremiah chapter 3, 14 to 16, actually through 17. And he was unfamiliar with it. And I was blown away that this world-renowned scholar was unfamiliar with Jeremiah chapter 3. And he said, well, Don, I'm not sure that I would use that in a formal public debate because your opponent may get up there and say that's not even a messianic prophecy. But when I kept sharing with him the elements that are here, he said, well, I see exactly what you're saying, but I've just never seen that before. And he said, boy, I've just got to study that. And then, as the program closed last week, I shared how on Pal Talk several years ago, I was invited on because there was a Jewish rabbi in there giving the Christians that were on there a really, really hard time. And they were talking about the temple and the restoration of Israel and what have you. They were talking about the Ark of the Covenant. And so I came on and I engaged this Jewish rabbi and I said, well, in Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 16, it says this, it shall come to pass when you are multiplied and increased in the land, in those days, says the Lord, they shall say no more the ark of the covenant of the Lord, neither shall it come to mind, neither shall they remember it, neither shall they visit it, neither shall that be done anymore. Now, as I pointed out last week, and everyone needs to do their own research on this, you can go to Bible Gateway, and in the search bar at the top, just type in Jeremiah 3:16, and then there's a little tab there that allows you to compare all English translations of Jeremiah chapter 3 and verse 16. And here's what you will find. You will find that by far the great majority of English translations of Jeremiah 3:16 renders that, neither shall it be built any more. Some render it, and another one shall never be built, or something along that line. The focus of the prediction, the focus of the prophecy, and look, I've pondered many, many times, why in the world the translators of the King James translation did not render this as the majority of other translations now do. Was it because they didn't have enough manuscripts? I do not know. I have no explanation for this. But I do know that without any doubt whatsoever, the majority of translations, and I'm talking all of the majority, let me see, what's the proper translation? In other words, committee translations is what I was looking for. Every single one of the major committee translations, and that is to say, translations that were produced by groups of scholars that got together to produce a translation. These are not translations by a single individual. Now, that lends credence to the translation because it means that all of these various scholars from different religious backgrounds agree on that given translation. Doesn't matter what the text is, but it means that they agree that the original text, as we have them, as close as we have to the original, agree that the proper translation is, "It shall not be built anymore. Another shall not be built." So when I shared that translation there on Pal Talk, and this is where I had to leave it off last week due to time constraints, that Jewish rabbi went ballistic. And he said, "That is not in the Bible. You are perverting the Scriptures." And I said, "Well, sir, no. I happen to be sitting here looking at my Bible as we talk." And I said, "By the way, let me point something out. That the Jewish Bible, the Jewish translation of the Tanakh, agrees with this translation." And he said, "Well, I have my Hebrew right here, and I'll prove you wrong. That is absolutely false." I said, "Okay, then what you've got to do is to prove that all of these translations, the huge majority of English translations, are in fact false." "Well, I'll just show you that you're wrong." Well, Pal Talk microphone went silent. And I mean, there was this long, long pause. And directly this Jewish rabbi came on and said, "Well, I just remembered something that I've got to do, so I've got to log off." And he literally disappeared. Well, in just a very few moments, another Jewish rabbi got on, and he came on and he said, "Well, I understand that there's someone on here claiming the Ark of the Covenant will never be restored, will never be found, etc." And I raised my hand and I said, "That would be me." And I said, "Let me read Jeremiah 3:16. And he responded exactly like the first guy had. He said, "You're perverting the Scriptures. The Bible does not say that. I have my Hebrew text right here." And I said, "Good. Read it for us." The mic went silent, and he said almost verbatim what the other one did. I just remembered I have something very, very important to do. I cannot continue this conversation. And he left. Now, folks, that to me was one of the most telling, and I must say enjoyable, exchanges that I ever had on Pal Talk. It was so telling that two Jewish rabbis who claimed to have their Hebrew text in front of them, who said that they were going to put me down, they were going to prove me false, and they never even read it. They never even tried to read a translation, their translation, on air. Instead, all of a sudden, if I can express it like this, they heard their mother calling them. So they had to leave. And to say that the response on Pal Talk among the others, the Christian believers on there, was amazing is an understatement. Now, I want everyone to tap into the importance of what I've just shared with you. Now, I've got to share, I am a huge History Channel buff on television. I am a huge fan of YouTube on Roku television. I will get on YouTube television and all of these, 12 most amazing archaeological finds, 12 most amazing biblical facts, this and that and the other. And there's a number of them on there about the search for the Ark of the Covenant. And the History Channel, over a period of months, over the last several months, they've had a couple of different documentaries on the search for the Ark of the Covenant. Now, let me interject right here. What I know everyone realizes, or at least I'm assuming everyone that will be listening to this program realizes, and that is that the doctrine of the restoration of the Ark of the Covenant into the Messianic Temple is an absolutely fundamental doctrine in the dispensational world. I mean, after all, the Ark of the Covenant represented the very presence of Yahweh. The Ark of the Covenant had the mercy seat on top of it, where the blood on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, that blood was sprinkled on the mercy seat and sprinkled and applied on the horns of the altar and sprinkled from the east and the west to the north to the south. That Ark of the Covenant is absolutely foundational to the dispensational paradigm. And by the way, who among us have not seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? William, I'm assuming you saw that movie, did you?
You know, I don't recall ever seeing that movie done. I am not a big movie buff, to be quite frank with you. I go to a few, but not a lot.
I am so disappointed in you, William Bell. Oh, my goodness. Well, yeah, I knew that you are not a huge movie buff. I think you and I, in all of our years together, have gone to one movie together, and that was what, Amadeus? Is that right?
No, that was the Titanic, I believe, wasn't it?
No. My wife and I went to see the Titanic. Yeah, I think it was Amadeus.
I know we were in Jackson, Tennessee when we went.
Yes, that's true. And I think it was the movie that
I don't
had
even
a
know
lot
what
of...
Amadeus is. I can't even remember that.
Well, I know that it had a lot of scenes in it, a lot of history about the slave trade and what have you. Horrific scenes. And we talked about it afterwards. But anyway, like I said, I knew that you were not a huge movie buff. And I'm not. My wife and I seldom go. We honestly do. Or don't. They're just not enough on that we feel like is worth, wasting our money on to go sit and have our intelligence insulted for, hour and a half or 2 hours. And so we just don't go. But like I said, I love History Channel. I love the Learning Channel. My television right now is on channel 1274 here for the local channel, local networking. And it is a program. Now, it carries lots of stuff that not everybody's interested in. I am a huge fan of the mystery or the curse of Oak Island. I'm hooked. I mean, I am absolutely hooked. I have been since the article came out in Reader's Digest. They currently have another program, and it's on the mystery of the Skinwalker Ranch. I heard about that when I was just a young guy. I'm hooked on that. But I'm also hooked on all of these historical documentaries. I watch almost any kind of documentary on ancient Rome so that I can know more about the culture and about the times in which the Bible was written. I want to know, I want to learn, and all of that. Well, in the midst of all of those, if there's any kind of a documentary on the Ark of the Covenant, I am watching it. And I have to tell you, folks, I am absolutely constantly stunned about all these people say, well, the Ark of the Covenant is underneath the Temple Mount. Jeremiah probably put it there. Or the Ark of the Covenant is in Ethiopia. And, I mean, there's some interesting and fascinating history in regard to Ethiopia and the arrival of Christianity there, and the form of Christianity as it has evolved there. Modern day Western Christianity would not recognize itself if it looked in the mirror of Ethiopian Christianity. And yet Ethiopian Christianity, the form that it takes, is far older than American Christianity. So it's really, really fascinating to do some comparison. But I've gone all the way around the mountain, okay, and talked about all of that stuff to bring us back home to Jeremiah chapter 3. In not one single documentary concerning the Ark of the Covenant, not one single documentary has even vaguely, remotely mentioned Jeremiah chapter 3. You know, I think we have a right to ask, number one, are the people who make these documentaries, and you know, they're dealing with historians. They're dealing with people who supposedly, in many instances, know the Bible. So, are the producers of these documentaries, are they and the people that they are interviewing so ignorant of the Bible that they do not know Jeremiah 3:16 exists? Or is it the fact that by conveniently ignoring Jeremiah chapter 3 and the fact that it says in the days of the restoration of Israel, which is the time of the Messianic kingdom, and thus the time of the Messianic temple, are they so blissfully ignorant of Jeremiah 3, or are they aware of the fact that if they realize the truthfulness of Jeremiah chapter 3, they can't make this documentary that says, oh, the Ark of the Covenant is under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. When will it be revealed? Or, my goodness, we're going to make a pilgrimage to Ethiopia, and we're going to go out there on the island where the Ark of the Covenant was supposedly kept for a little while until it was brought into Addis Ababa. And there it is housed in a shrine where a high priest, once he's appointed, lives in that shrine the entirety of his life. Never comes out, never gets married, has no intercourse with people whatsoever. That's it. That's the entirety of his life. And when he is asked, is the Ark of the Covenant in there? Oh, yes, absolutely. Ark of the Covenant is in there. Oh, wait a minute. What happened to Jeremiah 3:16? And I can tell you this. In that very first formal debate that I had, and I mentioned that earlier, when my opponent got up and talked about the Messianic Temple, and when I put up a chart, now that chart, back then, that was way, way, way before I knew anything about PowerPoint. That's before I knew what a computer really was. And I had all these handmade charts. My handwriting was not good then, and it's worse now. But I had a chart on Jeremiah chapter 3. And I got up there and I read that. It shall never be built again. My opponent never mentioned the Ark of the Covenant again. And I've got to tell you this, folks, in countless discussions about the Ark of the Covenant with dispensationalists and even some folks who do not call themselves dispensationalists, but they nonetheless believe that the temple will be rebuilt when the Lord comes back. And there's a little bit of that in the Eastern Orthodox Church, by the way. It was certainly a part of the early Achilleism of the early church. Men like Justin Martyr believed that Jerusalem would be restored. And some of the early writers believed that there would be a temple there in Jerusalem. They did not have the doctrine of restored animal sacrifices necessarily, like the dispensationalists do, but they certainly believed in a restored Jerusalem and a restored temple. You find a really strange admixture of beliefs in regard to the temple in those early church writers. But it astounds me, William, that in all of the early church writers, I have never found one mention of Jeremiah 3:16. Now, maybe I missed it, and I would suggest that, it's my own ignorance that I have simply never found it. It may be there, may very, very well be there, but I've never found it. I have never heard any of the people who claim to be experts in the patristics ever refer to Jeremiah chapter 3. And in all of these countless discussions with dispensationalists and millennialists of all sorts, every time I have introduced Jeremiah chapter 3:16 into the discussion, it's like the proverbial deer in the headlight look. They have stood there, and in many instances, if we didn't have the Bible, I have had people tell me, just like those Jewish rabbis did, "You're lying. That's not in the Bible. That is not there." And I've told them, why would I lie? I mean, it's so easy to grab a Bible and to prove me wrong. Let's grab a Bible. Let's see if I'm right or wrong. Well, I'm not even interested in talking to you anymore. You're just nothing but a false teacher and a liar. And yet Jeremiah 3:16 is still there. It's still there in the Jewish Bible. It's still there in the American Standard, New American Standard, Revised Standard, New Revised Standard, New English Translation. I mean, all of the major committee translations. And, well, the great majority of all English translations, period, agree with that translation. Only a tiny, tiny minority of translations do not include the statement, "It shall not be built any more." Now, William, it strikes me if there's going to be a millennial temple, and if the Ark of the Covenant is supposedly to be restored, isn't the fact that Jeremiah said, and by the way, we're going to establish here very shortly, if we don't run out of time, if I could find a shutting up place and let William talk here. But William, it seems to me like if there is a theological doctrine that says there's going to be a Messianic temple and there's going to be a restored Ark of the Covenant into that Messianic temple, that if the Bible teaches that, no, the Ark of the Covenant is never going to be built again, and it will never even be remembered again, that knocks a gaping hole in that dispensational doctrine of the millennial temple, does it not?
Well, I would certainly say so. Without the ark, can you really say the temple has been restored? And would it have, any validity in terms of, existing from that perspective, especially if they're going to build one that, has to be torn down again anyway, according to their view. So,
exactly.
So that means that it's not going to be the way into the holiest of all, even on their terms, and therefore would definitely need the Ark of the Covenant inside that temple. So for one that's not going to have it, that certainly, that just bites a plug out of that entire doctrinal point of view.
Well, to me, it just knocks the entire foundation out from under the dispensational view of the Messianic Temple. And they might respond and say, well, okay, I can see what you're saying, but they did not have the Ark of the Covenant in the temple in the first century. But is that really a valid argument against what we're saying here, William? Because after all, you see, the Ark of the Covenant disappeared in the time of Jeremiah. That's pretty clear from Jeremiah 3. that the Ark of the Covenant disappeared. By the way, in 2 Chronicles chapter 36, the Babylonians carried off all of the instruments of the temple off to Babylon, and evidently the Ark of the Covenant was one of those instruments, one of those items of the temple, and it was destroyed in the Babylonian captivity. I mean, all that we know for sure, all that we can say concretely is the Ark of the Covenant disappeared. Number two, it was destroyed. Number three, it will never be built again. And so those are the three facts that are absolutely indisputable. And that's all based on Jeremiah chapter 3 and the reality of the Babylonian captivity. And there's something else that is here. I was astounded just the other day by someone who told me that the temple at Jerusalem actually represented the New Covenant age. William, have you ever even heard that before?
No, not from that point of view. I'm interested to hear where you're going with it.
Yeah, I had made the point that Jesus predicted the destruction of the temple. The disciples linked that with the end of the age, and I had posed the question, what age did that temple represent? And I made the comment, that temple did not represent the New Covenant age. Well, this one individual just accosted me on Facebook and said, Don, you're just simply wrong. That temple did represent the New Covenant age because it pointed to it. And I said, let's be very clear here. There is no doubt that the Old Covenant temple pointed to the New Covenant temple. But it did not represent and symbolize the New Covenant or the New Covenant temple. Pointing to it is not the same as representing it or symbolizing it. And for all of that, I was, accused of being a false teacher and a heretic. Called a heretic for every reason under the sun, evidently. That's what it seems to amount to. But that's what this individual was saying. I had never heard anyone say, and by the way, someone else joined in with this individual. Of course, this person they got a bone to pick with me. They are strongly Calvinistic. They do not like the fact that I'm not a Calvinist. And so they take every opportunity to accost me about my failure and my false doctrine of not being a Calvinist. And I said, show me in Scripture where the temple at Jerusalem represented, symbolized, stood for the New Covenant. Show me where anyone, when they looked at that temple, would automatically think, oh, that's the New Covenant. No, they would have to look beyond that temple, look to the dissolution of that temple to see the New Covenant temple. Now, that's where I was going with that, William. Is that off base, or what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that's, right in line. Again, I can't see how they are going to, how they're using it from that point of view, other than from a typical point. And that's the way I would see it, because even from the Old Testament in Exodus 25, it was supposed to be made according to a pattern, and therefore with a shadow and type of it from that perspective. And so being a shadow and type, that's not the real thing, which is what, Hebrews says. It's a copy of the truth, but not the actual reality. And so the reality is what it typified. And from that perspective, I'd have to lean to what I understand about the Bible at this point.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say. And I kept repeating to them. I said, listen, fellas, do not misunderstand me. I agree. I teach. And I said, by the way, both of you know that I teach that the Old Covenant temple pointed forward to, it typified, that's the word I used, it typified the coming of the New Covenant Temple. But when people saw the Old Covenant Temple, they thought of Moses and the law. They thought of the Ark of the Covenant. They did not think of the cross of Christ. They did not think of the New Covenant, except in the type, antitype, prophecy versus fulfillment aspect of it. But I said, that's a far cry from saying that the Old Covenant Temple represented the New Covenant. It represented the law of Moses because that's where Torah set. But all of that is a little bit of a digression, although it's certainly relevant to our overall discussion of the Messianic Temple.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
Because I wonder if what they're getting at is when you look at the structure of the temple, some diagrams sort of indicate that it has like wings that would be in the shape of a cross. And so maybe from that perspective, I think that's what they're saying. But even then, that's still typical of of the New Covenant. So that's maybe what some of them are getting at. I haven't seen the conversation that you're talking about. I'm just trying to think about it based on some things that I've seen people say, and even some things that I've read in terms of how they look at the layout of the temple to see.
Yeah, and I understand what you're. Yeah. I understand exactly what you're saying there, and I've heard and I've read the same suggestions being made. Neither of these men ever indicated that they had anything remotely resembling that in mind. So
okay.
If they were just simply taking issue with me, and I told them, I said, I got to tell you guys, you're coming across as being nothing but nitpicking and negative, trying to find some fault, no matter how minor, trying to find some fault with what I'm trying to say. I said, let me reiterate, I agree 100%. The Old Covenant Temple pointed to the New Covenant Temple. And, to me, to say that the Old Covenant Temple represented or symbolized the New Covenant Temple would be able to then turn around in the reverse of that and to say the New Covenant Temple represented the Old Covenant Temple. Well, what would be wrong with that? Because that would be like saying, well, the reality points back to the shadow. It therefore represented it. But they wouldn't accept that. Not in 100 years. And so if you're not going to accept, the reverse of what you're saying, in other words, if you're going to say the Old Covenant Temple represented the New Covenant Temple, then why can you not say the New Covenant Temple represented the Old? Is there something wrong with that logic, William?
No, that would definitely be the case.
Well, anyway, all of that, you see, to me, is really, really, I think it's important to understand. It's important to understand the typological nature of the Old Covenant Temple. I emphasize that in that conversation over and over and over again. It is important to understand that the New Covenant Temple is the reality. And that when people today want to restore the Old Covenant typological temple, in essence, they're wanting to reject the New Covenant reality. They're wanting to return to the world of the shadows and disparage and depreciate the value of that to which the old pointed. As I have said many, many times to individuals, let me ask you a question. Which would you rather hug, the shadow of your wife or your wife? Now, the shadow points to your wife, but which would you rather hug? I mean, that's not a hard deal. And yet, I've had people scoff at that idea. Well, you got to have the shadow to have the reality, or you got to have the reality to have the shadow. Well, if I've got the reality, I don't really care if there's a shadow there or not. And You know, biblically, I'm not going to run over and try to hug the shadow once I'm hugging the reality. But people just, they say strange things. Now, to move on, because we've only got a very short period of time left, there's something else here, folks, that is very, very critical to understand from this text. Okay? Look at verse 16 again, very carefully. It shall come to pass that when you are multiplied and increased in the land, in those days, says the Lord, that they shall no more say the ark of the covenant of the Lord, neither shall it, I want you to notice it says, neither shall it come to mind. Now, that can be rendered as, it will not come to heart. But wait a minute. Neither shall it be remembered. Now, there's something really, really powerful about the Hebrew word translated as remember. This is the Hebrew word zakar. And zakar, while it can certainly mean, especially when a human being is talking about remembering things that happened in their life, mundane affairs, mundane events, et cetera, yet, in theological terms, the word zakar is a word that denotes covenantal remembrance. In other words, we very often hear of Yahweh remembered his covenant with Abraham. When Israel sinned, Yahweh remembered his covenant, and he brought punishment on them. Or if Israel was obedient, Yahweh remembered the covenant and he blessed them. The point being, folks, that the word zakar here, when it says the Ark of the Covenant will not be remembered anymore, it's not saying that the time is going to come in which God is going to just wave his hand over the brains and over the minds and over the memory of everyone in history and wipe out their, may I use the term, their physical memory of the Ark of the Covenant. That's not the point. The point is that the time was going to come in which, number one, the Ark of the Covenant would be destroyed and never built again. And number two, the Ark of the Covenant would lose its covenantal significance. William, I've been working on a book on the Sabbath for about 3 years now. Well, for the last year, I haven't worked on it except periodically gathering notes, doing a little bit of research here, inserting my research notes and what have you. But, William, what was in the Ark of the Covenant?
Well, you had Aaron's rod. It was one of those things that was there. I have to look at Hebrews to get the entire, to remember all of those parts. I know that they're there. But, there was the Aaron's rod that budded. There was the pot of the golden manna. And the tablets, of course. The tablets of stone.
That's what I was getting at.
Law. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. The two tablets of the Ten Commandments. Those two tablets were the covenant that Yahweh made with Israel at Sinai. The fourth commandment of the 10 commandments was 7 days you shall work, or 6 days you shall work, and the seventh day you shall do no labor at all. It is a holy Sabbath unto the Lord. So here in the Ark of the Covenant, holding the tablets of the covenant containing the Sabbath, the Lord said that covenant is going to be forgotten. And folks, we're out of time. But this is highly important for our study of the Messianic Temple. It's highly important for the study of the Sabbath. It's highly important for understanding the difference between the Old Covenant and the New. But in the meantime, out of time, William, great to be with you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us here on Two Guys in a Bible on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. With that, I will say good night and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Dunn Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.